Good evening, Canterbury. Welcome to NewsMakers, where we debate the week's big talking points. It's a pleasure to introduce our panel, Deputy Editor of the Press, Coen Lammers, the Director Extraordinaire of the 8th Christchurch Arts Festival, Boyce, and Chairman of the Central City Business Association, Antony, Gough. Thank you very much for joining us. We are going to start on the grisly front, the case of Clayton Weatherston and the ensuing debate over using provocation as a partial defence for murder. It's been a pretty repulsive trial, I think we'd all agree, and it is fascinating how the media and the public seemed to become transfixed by this case. Were you transfixed by it, Coen?
Well, it's pretty hard not to, just the bare facts of the case. And I think also the whole tutor-student scenario and the fact that he did stab her 216 times, and obviously her image as well. You know, she was a young, vibrant, brilliant, very smart young lady, and I think those elements made it nearly impossible to avoid. And then someone taking a stand for 5 days is fairly unprecedented, so it's hard not to get fixed on that trial.
The fact that Weatherston essentially had a national audience day after day seemed to be just too much for some people, questioning whether this is what we should allow, you know, when it comes to television news coverage. Did you find it a bit iffy, Guy?
In a sense, yes, and it's interesting, it's followed straight after David Bain, so It's almost as if the same machine has moved straight on after David. And in some senses, similar parallels were being drawn. A completely different case. And the right decision was made. So, in the end, it's interesting to look back at it. Provocation and that whole issue is very interesting, and I think it's going to be dealt with.
What are your thoughts on it, Antony?
I think it was to allow provocation is a total waste of our criminal precious time. It needs to be struck off the statute book. There is no place in it in New Zealand.
Where do you stand on this provocation move?
Well, I think we were pretty clear in the paper this morning that it's had its time. I agree with Anthony. The Sentencing Act has enough provisions in it to deal with it, and I think it's also it's had a life of its own. It started off really to give battered women an opportunity and a chance to defend themselves, but it's taken a real new twist. Every man and his dog has now been able to use it for their defence. And the recent case of the Hungarian who was provoked, who got off on provocation because he was provoked by being accused of being gay or gay advances.
That's right.
I think that's where the twist has just gone too far, and I think that's a clear signal that the law should be looked at. And the Law Commission proposed it 3 or 4 years ago already, and finally now, I think thanks to the Weatherston trial, it's moving ahead, and it's now got the political will that it needs.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that some people have said, this is a knee-jerk reaction from Simon Power, but it has been under consideration for quite some time. The fact that the Justice Minister has seized this moment to roll it out, does it look a bit expedient?
I think it does, to a certain extent, but in the end, should we worry if the right decision is made? You know, do
you want to see it go?
I'd like to see it go. I think there's no excuse for some of those crimes, as I agree with Con, I think that there's enough latitude within the law currently for it to be dealt with in those sort of ways.
I heard a caller to Hosking on ZB say the other day, what about if you have your dad's ears on listening to this trial, and let's suppose you are the father of Sophie Elliott and you discover this horrendous attack taking place on your daughter. You are provoked to intervene in the situation. You take out Clayton Weatherston. You'd be wanting to use provocation as a partial defence, would you not?
Isn't that a case where the law actually allows the sentencing judge to actually take that into consideration at sentencing time?
Sure.
And that's the right place, not waste 5 or 10 days of our criminal system and it's spent some money there.
All right. Well, our panel are unanimous on that, are they not? We are going to move on to the issue of cell phones. Question for you. What does Armenian fruit juice and driving while using a cell phone have in common? The answer is, of course, they are not good for your health. And the government has confirmed that a driver ban on using handheld cell phones will soon be in force. Should this practice be outlawed? Mr. Boyce.
Bring it on. I'm a cyclist in this city. I cycle into town every day, and I get very scared when I see somebody coming off a side road, often as they're doing with their hand texting or their hand in the cell phone. It's dangerous enough as it is without that. Yeah, get rid of them.
Would you do it? Do you do it?
I do. I have to admit, I do make some calls in the car, but I've just spent a couple of months in Europe, and after that, suddenly I'm so much more aware, because nowhere in Europe you can get away with it anymore. They pull you over and the fines are just extreme. So even just looking at your phone just about is enough to get a fine. And even if they see you in the phone in the car standing still, you can get fined. So yeah, totally agree. And the texting, that's just absurd. Watching people texting, looking at their phone, texting while they're driving is just insane. So yeah, it'll be a tough one to swallow for a lot of people, including myself. But we just need to get set up, and why can't you pull over?
The fact that we have allowed it for so long would suggest we've got one hell of a culture change to try and address now, have we not? I mean, compared to the European countries that banned this practice years ago, even Australian states outlawed this a long time ago.
I think we've just been a bit lax on appreciating how bad it is. You know, I've been very guilty of that, but I'm very supportive of banning it. I think it's the right thing, and perhaps it should force us to have hands-free kits.
Well, it's interesting you raised that, because there was some research from the US that was revealed earlier this week indicating that even hands-free cell phone use is still too much of a distraction for a driver. Stephen Joyce does not want to go that far. Should he? Should the hands-free be given the flick as well?
Well, you're getting into kind of interesting sort of area, because I think the research also says that having a cold also, you know, having a fly in your car, yes. Having the radio on, you know, as a man, I can only do one thing at a time. You're starting to get into kind of nuances of activity about what you can be doing as a car.
As a man, by the way, is having a woman in the car a distraction?
Yes. Definitely.
On that not so politically correct moment, we will take a break. We have plenty coming up. Do stay with us.